please join me in welcoming Eric Leblonde for Suricata and XDP, performance with an S like security. Great round of applause, please.
Oops. Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Leblond. I am one of the co-founders of Stamus Network, a company that is doing Suricata-based appliance. But if I'm here, is to talk to you about my work at OISF, as I'm one of the Suricata developers, and I'm in charge of packet acquisition. And I'm gonna talk to you about one journey I did start 2 years ago when I did want to add a bypassing feature to Suricata. It took me 2 years. That was quite an adventure because I started to code on things that were not even documented, just some commit in the Linux kernel. So that was really painful. And if you got one thing to, after the talk, is that you should bypass, yeah. So what is Suricata? So what it is not? So yeah, that was a tweet that made me not smile but cry, like Suricata parenthesis not. Okay. So yes, Suricata is a software that has been started 10 years ago. The idea was to do a clone of Snort with modern technology and with a real community. Because the problem with Snort, what was at the time, and still the same issue, that community is not a thing for the Snort project. Suricata is quite the contrary. We are welcoming ID coming from outside, and we are really community-based. So what is Suricata? So it's at the start a signature-based IDS. So it gets packet from the network, it reconstructs everything till the application layer, and then there is a detection engine that run and do the analysis. So if we take one signature example, we've got well, is it readable? Yes, it's readable, yeah. So we've got a list of keywords, and for instance, here we're checking that the HTTP stat code is 200, and then we'll do another check that we've got this hexadecimal content in the HTTP server body. So what Suricata has done here, it has analyzed packet per packet, reconstruct the TCP stream, do HTTP layer analysis, then extract the different fields inside the HTTP request, and then all of that is exposed to the detection engine, so you can use this keyword. For instance, let's say that here, in this HTTP server body match, the HTTP server is using gzip encryption to give you the data back. So if you look at the network stream, or the raw network stream, like you can see it in Wireshark, you will just have the compression noise. But what Suricata is doing transparently for you, it will dgzip the content, expose it to a detection engine, so the match that you will do on the HTTP server body content will be done on the dgzipped content, so the real content. So all of that is done by Suricata. So Suricata, on the key points, it's a GPL v2, it's owned by a foundation, which means that you can be sure that we will not switch to a commercial model, like privatize everything, because in the status of the foundation, it's stated that it is doing a GPL IDS. Suricata, it's the 10 years anniversary. The project was started in 2008 by Victor Julian, a Dutch developer. So if we get a few things to say, one of the major advantages at the beginning was the scalability via multi-threading. So there was quite of a fight with the Snort people about why using multi-threading would be interesting in IDS. And currently, the active part of the code is written in C and recently Rust. So we got a big move in Rust in the latest version. The idea was to, as we were talking in the talk before, about the secure coding policy. Secure coding guidelines, sorry. So it's really easy to make mistakes in the C programming language, like buffer overflow. Even if you are really, really careful, you will get into that. You will not escape. And the problem of the IDS is that a lot of people like to send us a really crap traffic just to explode the IDS, because if you explode the IDS, it's not there anymore, so you go undetected. So crashing the IDS is a good way to get your attack done without being detected. So we switch to Rust. That allows us to have we switch to Rust for the protocol parser, for recently introduced protocol parser, that allow us to have less exposure in terms of security vulnerability. When the Suricata team did start the development, it started at the first version with HTTP support, but then it was extended, and the idea was this one. So if we understand the protocol, why not journalize, log every request done for the protocol? This way, we will have network security monitoring features that will allow people to get the data, the request done on the protocol, and then if you have the request done on the protocol, what you can do is to simply detect a thing that did happen in the past. For instance, let's say somebody is coming to you and say, this IP address, this domain name is something really bad. If your client, if your customer inside your network did connect to this IP or to this domain, you can be sure that you have some malicious traffic and some intrusion in the client. So the IDS way would be to say, okay, let's add that to the list, and if somebody now is triggering this IP or this domain, we will have an alert, and we will be able to handle the alert. But in most cases, you know that the IP on the domain is bad after the attack. So by having network security monitoring in place, you can say, okay, give me all the connection to this IP, give me all the connection attempt to this domain, and then you can do some forensic analysis. Then you can get the list of IP in your network that have been compromised, and then you can do incident response. So that's basically the idea of network security monitoring. We are doing that on a quite huge list now of protocol. Most of the internal protocol are supported. And as you can see, you got a lot of data. For example, in TLS, we are analyzing the TLS handshake, so we're not doing decryption of the traffic, but we are doing an analysis of the handshake, and we can extract a lot of information about what certificate, since when it is authorized, when it will expire, this kind of thing. And we also have, you can see at the bottom, we have a new technique that is called GS3, which is a technique of fingerprinting the client of a TLS session. So it's quite a clever technique that allows us to detect, to build a string, and then a hash that identify one client. In fact, the implementation of one TLS client is always a bit custom, so we managed to see a difference between a Chrome or a Firefox connecting to a TLS server. Or Chrome or Chrome or Firefox may not be the most interesting, but if you have a malware, we can have an associated GS3 string, so you can find that a malware did connect using the GS3 string. So that's a new thing that did appear in the 4.1 that was released 1 month ago, that allows you to fingerprint the TLS client. So yeah. So the guy, after playing a bit with Suricata, the same one that was saying it was just a snort, did discover all these features and then came out with a tweet that was a bit better about that you can do, in fact, threat intelligence with Suricata. It's far more fun than IDS. I will focus on one of the features, which is the file analysis feature of Suricata. Because the first step was to do an IDS. Then, if you understand the application layer correctly, you got a better IDS. If you got the application layer, you can log the application layer. And then the next step was simply, yeah, okay, I can understand what's going on the wire. So maybe I can just extract the file that are exchanged using the protocol. So that has been done in one of the first releases of Suricata, with the ability to extract files from HTTP, SMTP, SMB, FTP, NFS, current status. And so what we can do is that we can have you can have a signature and say, okay, if this match, then I'm interested in that file. So you just add file store to your signature, the file store keyword to your signature, and then we will put on disk the file that has been seen on that did trigger the alert. We can also do some other thing, like building a checksum of a file in SHA-1, MD5, or SHA-256. And so you can see it here. So you got one exchange where we got the JSON logging, we got the HTTP request that did trigger the download, and then we've got the SHA-1 of the file. We've got the magic, so we are checking the beginning of the file using the libmagic, which is the same one that is powering the file command that you have on Linux or BSD. And then we output this, so doing that, you can detect, for instance, that somebody is doing the download of an executable, but in fact the extension is a JPEG or something, so we can mash like that and find some interesting thing. Yeah, so I just want to focus on two capture methods. So Suricata is both IDS, so we got live traffic, sniffing only, and then we got the prevention with the intrusion prevention system, so in blocking mode, where we stop the attack before it reaches the target. So in intrusion detection system, the most used on the recommended capture method is AF packet. If you are running Linux, if you're running BSD, you can use netmap. So what it does is that it gets the raw packet from the card using the fpacket capture method inside Linux, and then it does the complete analysis of the traffic. In intrusion prevention system, one of the most used system is the NetFilter, the Linux firewall with NFQ. So basically, you will have one rule in the firewalling rules that will say, if this match, then send the packet to Suricata, and Suricata will take the decision. So exactly like that. We've got a rule that has the queue instead of accept, which means that the packet or a message containing the packet will reach the user space. Suricata will pick the packet, do the reconstruction job inside, do the detection, and then say yes or no to the packet that will be dropped or that will go through the table. So what is the reconstruction work done by Suricata? So it's quite complicated with a different layer. One thing to remember before looking at that is that we are doing that, for instance, at 10 gigabytes per second. So it's kind of 9 million packets per second. But you have to do this kind of thing. Another element that I will not describe here, but we also are doing that with something like 40,000 signatures loaded into the IDS. So there is a lot of optimization in a lot of place to be able to deal with that. So what is the reconstruction work? So we're taking the individual IP packet, we check the invalidity of some, for example, an invalidity checksum. Then we are doing the defragmentation to get to the packet, for instance, here TCP packet. We check, we sanity check the TCP, like for instance, here we've got an out of window packet. Then once done, we reconstruct a stream that is in fact the content as seen by the host that we try to protect. Because what we want to see is the exact same thing as the host. The host, when you are doing a server, it just do a read on the socket. It don't know that there is multiple packet in the socket. So we have to have the same view as the host inside Suricata, so we can detect exactly what has been seen by the host. So this way, we will have something that is really accurate in terms of detection. And when we have done this streaming, the next step is that we now can do application layer analysis, so to get, as I was showing before, the different fields in the protocol, like a get and a download.php. So we are doing that live by getting the traffic. And if you do that live, bad thing will happen. One of the bad things will happen is that we will have packet loss. So if we are not able to deal correctly with the speed, at one moment we will lose packet. So what happened when we are losing packet? So I did do something quite simple. I took a big pickup, so not a big pickup, but just a 400 megabyte pickup. And I did modify it using TCP replay tool to drop randomly some packet inside, and then I generate a lot of different packet loss drop, packet rate, rate drop of a pickup, so different pickup based on the packet drop. And then I did graph the loss that we had. So Suricata is able to run in offline mode. So offline mode is you just run with -r on the pickup. So you got the perfect image of a pickup file, and then I got the pickup with the packet loss inside, but I did use to simulate the packet loss on a link. So the result for the alert is the following: if we miss 3% of packet, we are losing 10% of alert. And if you just lose 25% of a packet, you lose half of the alert. So the impact is not linear. You really, the more you lose, the more you lose alert. And if you look at the file extraction I was mentioning before, it's even worse. If you lose 0.4% of a packet, you are losing 10% of a file. And just with 5.5% of packet loss, you are losing 50% of the file extraction. So what's happening is that you need to have everything perfect to do file extraction, because you need to be able to do the streaming, then store the streaming on disk. So if ever you have one packet missing because you are with content, you will just stop having a perfect capture. So the capture needs to be perfect for the whole file. So as long as the file is multiple packets, if you lose one of them, you're done. So the ratio is really, really bad. So we need to be really careful about not losing packet. One other problem that we can face is that the task of doing the detection, of doing the application layer, is really expensive. So basically, one core of one CPU can handle something like between 250 and 500 megabytes per second. So we scale by duplicating the working thread. So we scale, but if ever you have some really big flow, as Suricata need to have one thread handling all the packet of a flow, not to share between the different threads and get asynchronous traffic. So we need to have all the packet for one flow coming to one thread. So this means that we got this elephant flow problem. Like this flow one is really, really big. Then it gets dispatched. And then, as you can see here, the flow one is filling in completely the ring after the flow load balancing. And we got some packet from the flow one and some packet from overflow that get dropped because they should have reached the same worker thread. And the problem is that the worker thread is already full with the packet from flow one. So clever people will say, yeah, just increase that, the ring buffer size, it will work. But yeah, if the traffic is a backup file that will stay all the night, I don't want to compute the terabyte of memory you need to get a ring buffer that will fit the backup inside. So it does not work. We need something a bit better than that. So a way to do that is to say, when I've got a traffic that is a flow that is quite big, I've got a lot of data in it, and after some times, maybe I could consider that it's not that worthy to do all the analysis of on the flow. Sorry. So in fact, in most cases, the attack that you can see on the network are in fact done at the beginning of a flow, because basically the guy just opened a connection, try to attack, and then get out. So if that way, you can say that it's a good compromise to say that you can stop doing a full inspection after some defined configuration, defined value, and stop inspection after that. Stop stream reconstruction, so inspection on stream after that. So this is done in Suricata in the configuration with a stream reassembly def. value by default is something like 1 megabyte, but you can put it to 0 if you want to do full inspection. That works too. Or you can set it to lower value. So it brings us some performance improvement. So big flow get less work done. So that's better. We are able to handle them faster. So if we are able to handle them faster, we are less likely to drop packet because of them. But it's not really super. It's not really well in terms of performance. So I did work on doing what we call bypass. So bypass is say, let's try to say that I don't want to see one flow, and I want to stop working on it as early as possible in all the stack from the driver to the to Suricata inside. So I did come up with two bypass methods. One is the local bypass method, where Suricata will discard the packet after decoding. Basically, it's really simple. We just get the packet, decode the packet to get the IP parameters, then check if it is in a flow that we know we want to bypass, and then we stop the inspection. We do nothing with it. And that's quite okay. But a better bypass system is the capture bypass, where we will, in this case, just ask to the lower part in the capture stack. So maybe in the card, maybe in the driver, maybe in the kernel, to say, okay, I don't want to see the packet from this flow anymore. So yes, local bypass. So we've got the same graph as before, with bypass that is done here, in fact, where we just say, we get the packet from the kernel, and as soon as we've done the decoding, we will know if we want to bypass them. So this way, we manage to not do the streaming, not do the detection, not do the application layer thing. We just do the decoding, and then we get out. The capture bypass is the following, where we just get the bypass done before we reach the lower thing. So the flow get bypassed before it reach the kernel. So it's really efficient. So I did code this by adding a callback function in Suricata. So the capture method can warn, Suricata can warn the capture method that you want to offload. And the first introduced bypass method was for the IPS mode with NFQ. So it was really simple because in NetFilter you can use mark. So you can set a mark on packet, and then you can propagate this mark to the connection tracking. So you got all the flow that is marked from the initial mark. So if we get back to the previous diagram, instead of queuing everything, you just queue the packet with mark 0. And what Suricata, when you want to bypass, it add a mark when taking the decision. So the packet get marked, then the connection get marked, and then all the packet from this flow get bypassed. So the performance boost is quite impressive because we switch from get the packet to user space, analyze the packet, get the packet back to kernel space, to direct kernel space routing. So the performance boost is quite good. So that was fun, but it's so what did we have as bypass method? One of the bypass method is to say the stream reassembly def, where we're not stopping to do the streaming, the application layer after some time. It's quite a good idea. So maybe we can just say, okay, if ever we reach the stream assembly def, bypass the flow. So this way, if you have a backup flow, you don't even need to detect it. You say, okay, I've got my 10 meg of inspection done. I stop now, and the flow will be bypassed. So for that, you just set the stream bypass to yes in the YAML configuration file, and you're done. Another one that is really interesting in 2018, and this will be more and more interesting, is the one linked with TLS. With TLS, we can analyze the on-check, but after, when we switch to encrypted message, we don't see anything and we cannot get anything. So if you set encrypt on link to bypass, as soon as the flow will be encrypted, but we cannot do anything with it, we will bypass it. So this way, all the TLS traffic almost all the TLS traffic, if you omit the few packets at the start of the session, they will be bypassed. So you get a good performance boost with that. And maybe you want to be to have a little bit more of granularity. So to do that, we have now a keyword, which is bypass, where you can say, if ever something match something, I want to bypass the traffic. So you dynamically can trigger that. So Suricata is coming with a flow ID, so application ID, so you can say it's a video stream like Netflix, a video messenger from Facebook, this kind of thing. So you can link this set of signature or write your own and then add bypass to them. So this way you can selectively bypass what you want, like bypass Netflix or something like that. Okay, so as I exposed before, we had easily a solution to have bypass working in the capture for NFQ, but now the most used Suricata setup is a F packet. So is it possible to do the same? So what we need is that we need Suricata to be able to tell the kernel to ignore some flows. So the kernel has to be able to maintain a flow table, and discard the packet belonging to this flow, and then we need to be able to update this flow table from the user space. And there is one new technology called eBPF. I will get into detail in the technology just after, that introduce maps, which are in fact shared data structure between the kernel and user space, and one of the data structure is a hash table. So it really fits well with the idea of a flow table. So that looks good. Let's start hacking on that. So what is extended Berkeley packet filter? Sorry, French accent combined to complicated US word. It's a virtual machine inside the kernel that you have. I think everybody here may have played with it. It's like in TCP dump, we are doing TCP dump sniff port 22. In fact, the port 22 gets converted to this virtual machine, which is a set of operators, set of registry, and then the filter is applied on the socket. So this is the BPF. And recently, 2 or 3 years ago, the people from the network community came with the extended BPF, which is an extended version. So you have got more registry, you've got more operation, and you have what I mentioned before, shared structure between user space and kernel. And you can now attach extended BPF to a lot of points in your system. When I say a lot of points, it's a lot of points. So we'll see that just later. So as you can see, port 22, like TCP dump syntax, is OK. But if you don't want to see port 22 in the hash, and then in the hash table look up for something, you really think that you need a programming system. So the developer came with a crazy idea. You write C code, it gets converted to eBPF code, and then you inject that into the kernel. And they came up with an even crazier idea, which is BCC for BPF compiler collection, that is allowing you to write Python code, including C code, dynamically build and then injected into the kernel. I'm going to do a demonstration. It's quite messy, but it works really well. So what you can do? You can do a lot of things. So here it's every name is in fact a command that you get with the BCC tools. So for instance, if you're interested in getting the slow query in AXT4, you can just start the AXT4 slower, and then you will get the information about the slow query that you got on your AXT4 partition on your system. So if you are interested in TCP, for instance, you can have a script, TCP connect, that will warn you as soon as there is a TCP connect on the system. So you really have code that you write, that you put in the kernel, in all the hooks that are described here. So you've got a lot of points where you can do a lot of things. So this has been used For instance, a lot by Netflix because of Brendan Gregg, that is one of the main developers of user space for the eBPF. And they are doing security monitoring, host-based security monitoring using this technology. So I really recommend you the presentation. It's quite interesting because they are explaining why we did choose this approach. Basically, the main advantage is that it's really extensible. You can write your own code. You find a new problem, you can just write an updated BPF filter, send the BPF filter to the system, and then you update your detection. In most cases, you can manage to get kernel version independent, so you can run that independently of the kernel. As we have seen before on this graph, you have hook almost everywhere, so you can plug yourself and get information in a lot of places. Yeah, so I wanted to give it a try, and I was interested in, let's say, rogue server. So let's say you have a farm of server, and you want to detect when somebody is trying to bind a socket. So bind a socket is trying to open a socket that will be able next to accept connection from outside. So basically, you have one client that can become a server. It's not something that you want to see. And then you output result to the console. And so I adapt one of the BCC script, and it's a Python code with some C inside. So let's do a demo. Oof, that's bad. Yes, okay, that's okay. Look. I think that's better. Okay, so let's start the process. So yes, I need to be root because I'm going to add a hook inside the kernel. Oh, yeah. Okay, so we got a warning that was expected. So as you can see, we've got a warning. Yeah, sorry. In fact, it was looking good on mine. Is it good like that? Okay, sorry. So let's start again. Yeah, so I'm starting the script. And then I've got the other one, bigger. So I start to listen on 223 on this IP. And if you look at here, we got NC that has opened a connection on the port 22. And yes, I've got systemd running, and that, like usual, systemd is doing crap. So yes, I've got a new connection opened by systemd. And one interesting thing is that, let's say I'm not root, I try to open the 223. I've got permission denied, yeah, sure. But I see the attempt in the system, because the hook is not like I'm scanning the /pros and getting information from the /pros, so I will see only authorized thing, but I just in the bind function, I've got my hook running and doing the analysis. So what is this? What is the code? The code is the following. So let's get bigger. Yeah. So yep. So I've got a BPF code. The BPF code is here, so it's C code inside my Python script. I've got a structure that I use to share the information. I've got some parsing. So here, for instance, I will get the information about what process did do the bind. I will get the protocol family. Like here, that's the best part here. Okay, let's just go here. Okay, so is the init bind function, that is the hook I attach. One of the parameters is the SOC address, which is a DDR. So if I can, here I say, okay, if the family is IFINET, so if it's TCP/4, IPv4, sorry, I just get the structure, and then I do some parsing. So I export my structure to the kernel, and then at the end, it's here. I submit the event to the system. So this is the C code, and then I've got here, I just do, please load the BPF that is in BPF text, open the perf buffer, and yep, do a poll to get the new event. So we're really event-based, we have no polling. We're polling the perf buffer, but perf buffer is just getting the information from this buffer. And so if you want to add your code, like getting JSON because you got a structure, outputting that, sending that to the queue, you got all the power of Python to send that outside. It's really convenient. And yes, just to get back to the run, you see I start the program, then I got a warning building the eBPF. This warning is in fact, here. So when you start Python sobind, it loads the text, do a temp file, call clang, the compiler on the temp file, create the structure, load this into the kernel, and then you are, okay, that's crazy. These guys are crazy. Yeah, so, okay, let's use that now to get bypass. So the bypass is the following. I've got my network interface capturing the traffic, then it goes to the driver, then it goes to the network stack, then I've got IF packet. Suricata is doing multi-thread, so I've got multiple IF packet socket, and so you can imagine that got maybe 16 sockets here, and then Suricata is getting the packet from the socket. So the bypass architecture is the following. I will have my eBPF code running in the socket, attached to the socket, that will query the flow table to see if the packet belongs to a flow, and it will query and do accounting. And then on Suricata side, they will be able to say, okay, I want to bypass this flow, so I will add an entry in the flow table by doing a query to the system. So I did implement that. I've done some tests on live traffic. The result is the following. It's super not readable, so you have to trust me. So here you got the number of packets handled by the system in red. In green, you've got the bypassed traffic. So here, as you can see, you've got a lower on the traffic handled by the system, and at the same time, a lot of bypass. So what we have here is that Suricata is handle just a few traffic, but at the same time, we've got a lot of traffic that is directly handled by the kernel. So this means that we did manage to handle a peak in the traffic without any impact on Suricata. Yeah, so that's just explanation on that. And if we look at this stage, so the minimum run on this live traffic, we can see that the normal case, we got a lot of packet loss, but with the bypass, we managed to really get down in terms of packet loss, with a best case of being almost no loss, and some cases that are a bit less good, let's say, but we're always better with a bypass from the normal one. Yeah, so as we can see, we got the bypass. Okay, the bypass done attached to the socket. So this means that here we got some work done, here we've got some work done, here we've got some work done. So basically, we've got the possibility to get up in the stack to get a drop of a packet being done sooner. So with the standard technology, it's not possible, but XDP has been introduced. So XDP is extreme, not extreme drop performance, but extreme data path, and that's a new technology that is currently stabilizing. The development is started something like 1 year and a half ago. And the idea is really simple, is to run eBPF code the sooner possible. So this means that you can get the same kind of code I've shown you, that will do a parsing in BPF, and then take a decision. The decision can be to drop the packet, to transmit it to the networking stack. You can also rewrite, redirect the packet to another interface. Oh no, we'll pass the last one, the CPU load balance. It's a tricky thing. So where you can run the code, you can run it in the driver. So you've got most of the drivers now are modified to be able to run eBPF. If you got recent on some specialized card like Netronome, you can even run the eBPF inside the FPGA of the card. And if you don't have any of that fancy thing, but you can just run the eBPF code in the network stack, like a bit like the AF packet filter. So this is interesting because it will allow you to run the packet dropping code really early. So one of the main usage of XDP is to fight DDoS, because if you want to handle a DDoS, you want to do the less work possible for every packet you want to finally drop. So basically, what the people are doing is that they're implementing some small code, like check that the IP source is not in a list, and they implement that really early in the stack. So we got some really huge performances. So I think that the performances I've seen in the latest version is something like they managed to drop almost the line rate by doing the analysis of. So I think it's 90% of the line rate. So you got DDoS that is taking almost all your bandwidth with a series of IP that you want to match on, and you do the match in the eBPF in XDP, and you get the packet dropped at a really, really high speed, so that allow you to get only the normal traffic inside your system, because you have dropped all the packet from the IP that are in the blacklist. So the code was a bit different, but the logic was the same. You got the eBPF filter inside Suricata. And so here, as you can see, the standard implementation will have eBPF attached to the driver. So instead of doing that for every AF packet socket, we will have one single eBPF file running attached to the driver that will do the query and the routing exactly the same process as before. But we skip the network stack. And the network stack is doing a lot of work, like allocating structure that will be allow the routing of a packet. So it's quite expensive. So by doing XDP, we managed to have, in fact, the analysis that is done, the blocking that is done really earlier. So we spare a lot of CPU cycle. Yeah, so one thing I did not yet mention is the IPS mode for AF packet. So the principle is the following. We've got Suricata in the middle of two network interface. It gets packet from AF packet, do the detection, and then write the packet to a raw socket on the other side. On reverse, we get the packet, and we write the other side. So this way, you've got a layer 2 bridge done by Suricata. So if you are in bridge mode, you even less from in the detection mode, you want not to drop packet, because if ever you drop packet, you will just break the system, break the network. So if you want to do bypass by dropping packet, it will just not work, because it will block the packet. You really need to be able to copy it. But if you copy it and do everything, it will be slow. So yeah, no bypass, it will not be fun. So in fact, we can just use TX redirect, which is one of the feature of XDP, where we can just say, get the packet that I want, get the packet, the eBPF code is running, I detect it's something I want to bypass. So and instead of dropping, I just do a copy to the TX queue of the NIC in the other side. So I bypass completely the kernel. I take the packet from the card, just do a small analysis in the driver or even in the card, and then I copy that directly to the transmit queue of the card. So I completely bypass the kernel, so I've got the maximum speed possible. So yeah, it's direct NIC to NIC transfer. And if your eBPF code is run fast enough, then you can really have some good performance. So yeah. Sadly, I did not manage to get my hand on a system powerful enough to run this. It should come soon, so that I will show some real numbers soon. Yeah. So the eBPF on XDP is available in Suricata 4.1. You need a recent Linux kernel. I'm currently working with a Netronome company to have BPF on XDP running inside the card, so to get a really early drop. And there is a new capture method, FXDP, coming that I will try to implement soon. And yes, that's it. So if you got question.
There's a few minutes before lunch break, so don't rush out early.
Hi, so this kind of related to Suricata. Basically, do you know of any way to implement Suricata on Kubernetes clusters so that, for example, every single pod or container is going to go through Suricata as a sidecar, for example? Or at least I haven't seen a lot on deploying it with containers, deploying Suricata with containers.
You mean sniffing the traffic of container with Suricata, or putting Suricata inside the container to run?
You could technically just create a sidecar and route all the traffic from a particular pod or a particular container through the Suricata sidecar, and then deploy it with the different pods that you have of containers. Or in a Kubernetes cluster, or make sure that each host is going through a Suricata process. We had some discussion on the subject. I don't know any implementation of that, but it should be doable. Yeah. Yeah, it should.
Any more questions? Yes.
Are you also looking into accelerating with the Intel cards? Because there's some programmable BPF filters and possibilities in Intel cards as well.
Yes, there is a floatable available in Intel card. I did not really experiment with that. One of the main reasons is that the size was not that huge in terms of number of flow, and as you want to have the benefit in huge flow, in huge network, you have a lot of flow, so that was the main issue.
I guess that was with regard to Intel Quick Assist. That question, is that correct? Okay. Because that has been added to BPF on BSD already by the pfSense project, but I don't know if it's already in eBPF, which is from the Linux side and now coming back to BSD. One last question. No, everyone's hungry already? Okay, well then, thank you very much, Eric.
Thank you.